From Beyond the Beltway, this is Bruce DuMont with our weekly analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight featuring commentary by Mike Miller from DePaul University, Peter Hanna from Chicago Kent College of Law, and also some special guests along the way. Nice to have you with us. Merry Christmas, everyone. We're coming to you from our studios, AM 560 WIND Radio in beautiful Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Nice to have you with us. I hope you had a wonderful Merry Christmas, and perhaps you were still celebrating it. You've got some leftovers on the table that you were devouring as you listen or watch Beyond the Beltway this evening. Nice to have you with us. We're going to divide the show into a variety of different areas, and we're going to start with an old friend who spent many, many years around the table with us here in Chicago from DePaul University, an economist, Mike Miller, who has now moved to the great state of Washington. And Mike Miller, Merry Christmas to you. Nice to have you with us this evening.
And it's great to be with you always. I always enjoy being on and talking to your listeners.
Very good. My question to you is, as you look back on the past year, 2021, take us through the year. What were the high points, low points that you observe as an economist?
Oh, as an economist, here's what's so interesting about this year. We have been making great progress. The economy is doing much better, with two major exceptions. So we got into the summer, and the forecasts for the second part of the calendar year were for economic growth, GDP, which was going to be almost record-breaking. And then we had the Delta variant, and all the forecasts went down. But in spite of that, gross domestic product did rise, and it is near its potential. Unemployment continued to fall. We even have had an uptick in the amount of participation by people into the labor force. But two things have occurred that are very troublesome. The first one is a little bit more minor than the other, and the first one that's an issue is consumer confidence. It's in the tank. It is as low as it has been since the Great Recession. And that's a problem, that people simply don't have faith that the economy is going to do well going forward. But we all know that the real problem is inflation.
How does that demonstrate itself, Mike? A lack of confidence, how does that manifest itself?
It tends to be consistent with other economic indicators in that it would be if you find that consumer confidence is low, there could be some problems that people are not going to spend as much as they were going to. Now, consumer spending is doing well, but people, I think, would like to be doing more. And this also means that they won't take as many risks as they would normally because they don't have as much confidence in the future. But the thing that's really hurting the households right now is inflation. And this is the worst inflation we have had since the early 1980s. And this is on a year-over-year basis. So if you got a raise last January, and let's say that raise was nice and it was it got you even with the that your real income was constant, you're down about 8% over this year. So it's really people are beginning to feel it. It is not something that's focused only upon energy or say one or two areas. It is affecting all the areas of the economy. No matter where you go to buy, you're finding the prices are rising. Happen? And what's that?
What causes that to happen? When you talk about
almost
inflation,
in all cases, you would expect that the blame would go to the Federal Reserve. But we have three things coming together that seem to be adding to the problem. One is a supply chain problem that people keep talking about, and therefore when things are not in great supply, sellers are able to, in a sense, allow the price to rise because people will pay extra to get it. There's an increase in demand, partly because of a buildup after the pandemic. People have money, they want to spend it. And then on top of that, we have the government, which is adding all of this additional spending. Earlier in the year, it was assistance to households. Now they have the Build Back Better and so forth, and they're making all kinds of expenditures when the economy is near full employment. And I'll add one more piece to that. When the federal government spends all this extra money and it is financed by the Federal Reserve, essentially printing money, this is inflationary. So we have three things coming together. We have cost rising, we have demand pulling the price up, and we have the money supply stoking this particular inflation and allowing it to occur. So a blame in some sense goes all around. It's not just one place.
Now, you said that we're near full employment, and yet I can't walk by any store that does not have a sign up that says they're hiring. And, a couple of weeks ago, I just jumped on to see if there was some part-time job that might interest me, and I signed up with one online job hunting service, and they told another one, and they told another one, and literally, I'll get 50 job offers a day, literally, allegedly.
Wow.
So I'm wondering what it doesn't seem to me like we're at full employment when you go into some restaurants and retail operations.
Yeah. Well, what we do is, in some sense, we have, I guess you would call it, a shortage of workers who are willing to work at the going wages and so forth. If you look at it as an unemployment rate, something we call U3, the number that has officially been the unemployment rate over the past couple of decades, it's at 4.2%. That is essentially full employment. Now, one thing that would happen is that those jobs that you're talking about would be filled if more people would come in off the sidelines and begin to re-enter the market. But you have a lot of people who are retiring. So baby boomers are simply retiring. And therefore, there is this mismatch between the number of people available to take jobs and the number of jobs available. It is the oddest thing. There's something called the JOLTS report, which has to do with job openings and losses and so forth and turnover. And we do have people quitting jobs because they have complete confidence they can find jobs. We have people, businesses who are just begging for people to work for them. And we have people deciding where they want to go and getting, they're going to ask for bigger salaries or bigger wages because they have the market power to be able to do that. It's an unusual labor condition right now.
How badly has this affected real estate?
Well, real estate, of course, there was a shortage of homes on the market. And then when you have interest rates at what essentially are historic lows, when you have 30-year mortgage rates, fixed rates that are in the low threes, these are astounding rates, especially now with inflation at the rate that it is. You essentially are borrowing money for free. You're not paying anything in terms of real interest rate, and but that does create a problem with real estate for commercial real estate, because while people have begun to go out and travel and so forth, go out to eat, but office buildings and so forth, there are still some who are waiting for some kind of a shoe to drop when it comes to commercial real estate. It hasn't happened yet, and the adjustments are being made. But that is one other part of the economy that there is some worry.
Okay. Mike Miller is joining us. He is a professor of economics at DePaul University. Although he now lives in the great state of Washington, he still teaches his course at DePaul University. When we come back, we'll be welcoming another old friend of this program, Peter Hanna. We're going to be talking about some of the crime problems in America. He is a professor at Chicago-Kent College of Law. I'm Bruce DuMont.
Oh, hello. These days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Type 2 diabetes can have a big impact on your life, but how can it be prevented? Well, the first step is knowing if you have prediabetes, a serious medical condition that puts you at high risk for type 2 diabetes. 1 in 3 American adults has prediabetes, but more than 80% don't know they have it. The good news is, prediabetes can be reversed, and for many people, healthy changes in their daily routine can make a big difference. Take the 1-minute risk test today at doihavepreddiabetes.org.
Bruce DuMont back. We continue now, and joining us is Peter Hanna from Chicago-Kent College of Law, who has been a frequent guest on this program. He joins us along with Mike Miller. And happy holidays to you, Peter. Let me ask you this question. You were born in Egypt. You've been a long time U.S. citizen. What religion do you celebrate?
Christmas. We're actually Coptic Orthodox, which is Christian. So we celebrate Christmas, although the calendar is closer to the like Eastern Orthodox churches. So although we, have always opened presents and stuff on the 25th, the church mass and the sort of like associated religious services happen on January 6th/7th.
So
it's actually January 7th, but
I can still wish you
it's a night mass.
I can still wish you a Merry Christmas then.
Yeah, you can wish you a Merry Christmas,
Okay, good.
even if I didn't celebrate Christmas, and it would be okay. But as it happens, I do. So,
good.
know.
Well, Mike Miller joins us, and one of the things we talked with Mike about was the economy in the first 15 minutes of the show. And one thing I'd like to talk with you about is the issue of crime throughout the year. There is the rise in murders in many large areas of the United States. There is the smash and grab crime. There is the carjacking. There have been a couple of high visibility trials this year. As you look at the totality of everything that's happened, has the criminal justice system come out okay? Do they get a good grade for this year, or do they get a bad grade? And I'm talking about the criminal justice system, not necessarily policing.
Yeah. I think the criminal justice system, perpetually gets an F, to be honest with you. I think it is a system that is in need of significant reform. There's definitely statistics that show certain crime has increased. I could also point to statistics that show that certain crimes have decreased. I think media attention on, this crime wave narrative, it sells, it's appealing, and it's really easy to kind of glom over. But the truth of the matter is, when I walk around Chicago, from neighborhood to neighborhood, I notice that there are, the neighborhoods I'm in, like no one around me is walking around in need. You know what I mean? Most people have all their needs met. And, I wouldn't know, frankly, I wouldn't know what the crime situation was, my immediate, surrounding area, because, all the people here generally have their needs met. But I think, you can't just put it all in the criminal justice system. I think just the city as a whole is failing to satisfy, a lot of needs. And as a result, I think people are looking for a way to get by as they can. And, that's making a lot of, crimes increase. And the media loves to sort of magnify that and amplify it, because it's obviously an appealing and compelling story.
Peter, insofar as needs are concerned, is it really needy that someone needs a Gucci purse stolen from a Gucci store on Michigan Avenue, or any other high-level item, fashion item, that has been smashed and grabbed from a shopping center, whether it's in Northern California, Chicago, or New York, or Atlanta? I mean, that's not need, is it? Isn't it greed? Or is it just a crime?
I can't speak for any. Go ahead, sorry.
Or it's just a crime. It's criminal activity.
A crime's a crime, and I can't speak for the nature of anyone's need, but obviously, those things have value, and that value could be used, to fulfill different needs. And I think really the question is, if you have a home and you have healthcare and you have a job and you have a future, you don't need to smash and grab anything. Right. You don't need to do that stuff. And again, I think when it seems like there is no future and there is no hope. And, when I'm walking home, I don't even know if I'll have, food on the table or, a way to get to work the next day. A lot of these other things seem more appealing. But again, it's a messed up cycle because we have, the criminal justice system not doing the right thing with the people in front of it. We have, police who, have their own set of problems. We have people whose needs aren't being met. And we have a media who obviously, they amplify all these stories. You asked Mike, like, what were some good things and bad things that happened this year. There's a lot of great things that happened this year, but people would be surprised to learn of it in this media environment.
Well, a lot of people would say that a lot of good things happened. They would argue that the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict was good. The Jussie Smollett verdict was good. The Arbery decision in Georgia, that was good. I mean, that's a jury system looking at controversial issues, and all independently, they all made a verdict. And I would say that most people in the country probably agreed with those verdicts, maybe with the exception of the Kyle Rittenhouse. But, I mean, that was the justice system working its way, or its magic, as some people suggest. Mike Miller, I want you to.
Without speaking.
Yeah, I want Mike.
Please.
I want Mike to weigh in on what Peter had to say. And again, you're now 1,000 miles away from Chicago, but again, you're watching the network news, which is creating a very widespread impression about what life in Chicago is like, as well as other major cities.
Yeah, it could even, being an economist, I often look for what is the economic theory of, and that would be the economic theory of crime. And it has to do with what is the probability you will be caught. And if you are caught, what is the probability you will serve time and how much time and so forth. And the disturbing thing here, and it should be of no surprise, is that many jurisdictions have decided that minor crimes, as they call them, which are crimes of poverty or want, are not going to be prosecuted. Therefore, if you lower the probability that people will be arrested and have to serve time for these kinds of crimes, there will be more of these crimes. And I'm convinced that this is the reason why we see all this smash and grab going on. It's very, to me, it's not surprising. And I think there's going to be a backlash. This is no way for a society to live. I know the idea of taking care of the turnstile jumpers, that was one way that they got New York under control. If you take care of the small crimes, people will realize you're going to take care of crimes, and people are going to be incarcerated. And I know it leads to this concern about mass incarceration, but when people are not they're not partaking in a civil society. They are robbing and stealing and beating and so forth. They have to spend some time away from society.
Peter, I want to get Peter's response.
When the prosecutors say they're not going to do that, there's going to be more crime.
Peter, your response to what Mike just said.
Yeah, I mean, I respectfully disagree with that. I grew up in New York in the 80s and 90s, and I saw sort of the transformation of the city and the cost that it came with. And the cost that it came with was pretty substantial. We can't just like slide over, cause over incarceration. I mean, we have an incarceration epidemic and crisis in America. We incarcerate more people per capita. I mean, most of your listeners and most of the people on this call know the statistics. I mean, it's absurd. We have tons of private prisons. I mean, it's absurd. So the idea of someone stole a Snickers bar, stole a bag. Well, let's put them in jail for like a year.
I didn't say that.
I'll just finish. I'm not saying you are, Mike. I'm saying that concept, right? This concept where a low-level crime should be, the person should be quote unquote put away. Number one, it has a cascading effect. When I have to spend like 30 days or even 5 days in jail and I can't go to my job isn't there, right? So that's kind of a problem that I think you completely slide over. And then the second thing is there's another option. Like if you take that person and you say, why did you do this? And you engage with them and you basically find out what the missing need is, what led you to do this, you can try to address the problem. And the reality is, again, there's a sense of desperation, and that sense is kind of creeping up, the economic, food chain or whatever, of precariousness and people who have no hope.
Well,
So
Peter,
I think
why
throwing
would
them in
you-
jail, just throwing them in jail instinctively, especially for quote unquote low level crimes, that is a failed policy that has been failed my entire lifetime.
Peter, but why would you have not seen then this uptick in crime based upon need that you keep focusing upon during the Great Recession when unemployment was over 10%? Unemployment's at 4.2%. People who want a job can have a job. If people are hungry, there's places to go to get their food. They're not stealing food. They're stealing other things. They're committed, and there are some people who just are criminals. I
disagree.
understand.
I don't. I think
You
that's a
mean there's-
fundamental. That's
You
respectfully.
don't think that there's evil in the world? That there are some
No, I mean, of
people
course,
who
I'm not.
commit
I'm not
evil?
saying that.
Okay.
It's a quick thing, but a quick jump of a large chasm. I'm simply saying that when you say there are just people who are criminals, I mean, you're speaking. This is. I mean, kind of insulting in a
No,
way,
it's not.
because you're basically saying that there are people who are just like not humans. They are.
I didn't say
criminals,
that.
and thus,
Don't put
by-
words in my mouth.
I'm
I
not
did not
putting.
say
I didn't say you said that. I said you're implying this. But to your point
I am
about
not
low-level
implying.
crimes, I can point to statistics for you. So San Francisco robberies in 2021 are lower than 2020, and lower than 2019, and lower than 2018. The same is true for Los Angeles. These are robberies, and these are police records. So, I mean, I could point to things and debunk a lot of this narrative if we get into the details, but I will agree, certain crimes are going up. But as on the whole, crime's actually gone down. It continues to go down. But in the end, what it's about is why are people doing this? Like, why are they doing this? And do you want to put someone in jail for 30 days or even 15 days, although that's a lot more lenient than actual sentences are, for stealing like a Gucci bag? It's just kind of absurd. It's much better to engage that person, find out why they did that, and try to actually figure out how we can turn this activity into a positive.
When we come back, I want to follow up on that. How do you engage a young person who may be going out or has gone out and smashed and grabbed and either hijacked or either carjacked somebody or stolen a Gucci purse? How do you get to them before they do it? I want to hear Peter's response when we continue. I'm Bruce DuMont.
Along the way is where we find the unexpected. Along the way is where we take in the scenery, and often where we have the most fun. Sure, along the way can be the place we stop to fill up or grab a bite to eat. But in Michigan, along the way becomes the place we've been longing for. Because enjoying the journey is always pure Michigan. Your trip begins at Michigan.org.
The central and midwestern U.S. averages more than 850 tornadoes each year, and lately, the number of floods has been rising in the region too. So chances are, there will be more twisters and floods near here again. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are, you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has all the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Nice to have you with us on the day after Christmas. Hopefully, all your packages arrived in time and they all fit, or you were busy today heading out, exchanging things, or finding out what the hell did you do with that gift certificate somebody gave you, and was it only $25? They can afford more than that. Whatever. Merry Christmas wherever you are. We're celebrating this evening with some guests that have been on this program periodically throughout the year. Mike Miller is with us. He's the economist from DePaul University. Peter Hanna, he's a professor of law at Chicago-Kent College of Law. And also joining us now is Brent Hamercheck. He's with Human Events. Brent, nice to have you with us on our broadcast as well this evening. Merry Christmas to you.
It's always a pleasure to be here. I consider you the senior statesman of American television, radio, all those things. So Merry Christmas to you, Bruce.
I guess that's my Christmas present. I want to go back to Peter and give him an opportunity to explain how you go about teaching people that it's not right to steal. And I've simplified that as best I can. If you think that's an unfair question, Peter, tell me. But again, I think everybody listening to the program would like to be able to say, yes, that's a program we can get behind. So take a crack at it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a little bit of an unfair framing, Bruce, but I think what we really need to do is, very few people who steal or commit a crime like that are under some sort of, misconception that what they're doing is, morally okay or societally okay, unless, they've gotten there by some weird pathway in their life. But I think what your real question is, how do we, if incarceration isn't the solution, what is the solution? And I think, some of the solutions that have worked, and there's a ton of data to show that this sort of thing works, is diversion programs, like diverting people from, being immediately put into the criminal legal system pipeline and deflecting whatever their actions are, whatever their thinking is, in a different direction. When you look at these programs across the country, they're really, really successful. They're, usually pretty inexpensive, usually much less expensive than the process of, bringing someone to prison.
What are some of these programs?
Et cetera.
What are some of these programs? I mean, by the way, I agree with you. And by the way, because this has been one of my pet topics for the last 5-6 years on this program. I do not believe in mass incarnation. It just imprisonment. That's what I meant to say. I don't believe in that. But I also believe that it's somewhere on the other end. You said that you want to be able to have someone, I don't know whether it was government, trying to suggest to people that it was wrong to steal, and I'm just saying is there are mechanisms in place for that. It's called parenting. It's called your local parish or your pastor. It's called schools. It's societal institutions that should be teaching you right from wrong, which is basically don't steal. It's a commandment for those that are believers. It's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. And yet, collectively, we have not gotten that message down to rampaging numbers of young teenagers who feel that it's okay to steal and smash and grab, whether it's a car or it's a Gucci purse.
Yeah, again, I mean, I really have to disagree with you there. I think everyone knows stealing is wrong. But, you said parents or their parishes or their schools, but not everyone has parents who are teaching them important lessons and parishes to go to, or schools or institutions they could trust. And part of the reason that's the case is, a lot of our communities are very underfunded, over-policed and underfunded. So I think I actually agree with you, Bruce. I think you invest more in communities, you get less of this. But when you turn communities into sort of abandoned, like no-go zones, you do get this sort of stuff. Eventually something, bubbles up, over the cauldron. And that's what we're getting. You have to actually invest in places to get the results that you want. And I mean, that's really where I think we're at.
Okay. Well, again, we can discuss how that's done, but I want to bring Brent into the conversation. Brent, let's pick up on this matter. I mean, obviously, you have a perceived crime wave. And again, we did a program last week here, which sort of separated, murder and major crime from smash and grab and even, some of the carjacking that goes on. There is a perception that crime is rampant in America. Now, I don't know whether that's just the media jumping on a narrative, which I think is possible because they tend to do that. But again, there's a perception, at least in many areas, and I think this is where maybe Peter and I would disagree. I mean, he doesn't necessarily sense that, in the neighborhood where he lives, but, Peter lives just not too far from where I live, and it certainly is a perception in my neighborhood that, taking a stroll down Michigan Avenue is not something that you can do with a complete sense of security anymore. So where does society go, without pointing fingers, Brent, where can society go to try to deal with some of these issues in a serious manner? And is there a role of government to play?
Well, right, in 30 seconds or less, right?
No, you
but
have
it's sort
more
of
than 30
interesting that Los Angeles was mentioned earlier. I mean, look, the chief of police in Los Angeles last week or a few weeks ago told people not to come to Los Angeles because you can't guarantee their safety.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think here's what we're starting to look at. Here's what we're starting to see. So it was well over 100 plus years ago that the old philosopher Nietzsche had the great line where he said, God is dead. And what he meant by that was that modern society, mind you, in the 19th century, had killed him, that they no longer needed him. And he worried about what that might mean for people going forward. We live today in a society where in modern America, we've sort of killed God, not a big presence in American life. And we don't have people walking around with any sense of true objective right or wrong. Most people don't even know what an ethical system is. Peter mentioned, people know that when they're stealing, they're doing something wrong. Well, it's not really the question, is it? The question is, do they care? And less what we're finding in today's America, that people simply don't care. And here's an interesting point to contemplate. And that is, did they ever really care? Because the question is also, what is our nature? And I would argue that what we're having collide in America today is that man's nature, which isn't fundamentally good, is being allowed to be expressed by a legal system, a social set of structures that are letting the beast loose. So what we have running around in the streets of Chicago, they aren't wild men, they aren't animals, they aren't anything special. They're just a bunch of moral relativists who are being allowed to get away with whatever they want. One final point with regard to investment. Of course, investment's a neat sounding word that folks like to use that really means spending a bunch of tax dollars. We've spent extraordinary amounts of tax dollars since the 1960s in exactly the kinds of neighborhoods and exactly the kinds of programs that we're talking about here. It doesn't work. Spending money to cure a social ill has never worked in all of human history, and it's not going to work here.
Okay,
we need to find our way back to a sense of morality if we can make it there.
Take a breath, if you will. Peter, we're going to go to you for a couple of minutes, and then I want to go back to Mike. Peter, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of kind of surprised and taken aback. I think, Brent's view is I think pretty divorced from mine. And I would also say a lot of what the reality on the ground is, as someone who has, walked the streets of Chicago and interacted with and represented in my career, many people who have come from communities, that are underserved. I've seen them. I've spent time there. I mean, I urge anyone who doubts it to go see for themselves, because there is a huge gulf. There's just a huge gulf there. This is not the social. I mean, just hearing you, Brent, talk about like the system allowing people to become moral relativists and whatnot. I mean, it's just kind of like an over-engineered thought process to get there. It's much more simple. We have not done a good job of living up to the values that I think we all say we live up to. We haven't really given people equality. We haven't given them truly equal opportunities. The criminal legal system is incredibly punitive. Once you get in, once you have a felony on your record, there's so many cascading effects. Once you miss work because you had to spend a night or a few days in jail, that changes things. And this happens all the time for people, less fortunate than we are.
I totally agree with that.
Just to wrap up, I'm not saying that there are no criminals in the world or there aren't people who would, exploit a system. There are certainly criminals at the top end of the economic spectrum who walk away from, everything, just, untouched. And, when it comes to spending, it's so funny. We hear, $800 billion going to the federal government's military. And just today, I saw a video of something they're doing in South Dakota where they're having teachers chase dollars that are being blown around on the ground, just dollar bills, to try to stuff them in a sack so they could buy supplies for their students. $9 trillion injected into the economy by the Fed. I'm sure, obviously, Mike, you could talk about that. But when it comes to actually like spending some money to like build a park or improve a school in a community, we balk at that. That's okay. Wait a minute.
But those things
it's just
happen.
kind of silly.
We have to break,
view.
guys.
When Brent was speaking,
guys, we have to break. We've got to break. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us today. No phone calls tonight. We are recorded because it is a holiday, but we will hear from the great Mike Miller when we come back.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
Bruce DuMont back. One other issue that we've not talked about is more and more people are willing to buy stolen goods online. These smash and grabbers. I mean, they're offering that stuff for sale. People are buying it, and as a person who I spoke with earlier this week referenced that to a lot of people, having a Gucci purse, whether it's a real one or a fake one, gives them a sense of credibility and accomplishment. And it brings them so much joy, they don't think about the fact that it is stolen property. And again, everybody's looking for a bargain, but again, if we get into a discussion of stolen property and how people are looking for something for nothing, we could talk to the cows come home and not get a resolution on that. Okay, back to Mike Miller. You've been standing by, and let me mention before
Sure.
we let you talk, I want to mention that in our second hour this evening, we have Judy Sherwin and Rush Darwish. They will be at each other's heads when we continue in the next hour of this program. And also, we will hear from the dynamic duo from Spokane, Washington. We're going to be hearing from David Kilmer and Joy Wagner. These are the regular callers to Beyond the Beltway. They don't really know each other, but they've been on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and we're going to have them as a debate, and that'll be our last half hour of the show next week on Beyond the Beltway. So don't go away. Go ahead. Actually, in the second hour tonight. Go ahead. You're on the air. Mike Miller.
Well, I wish the world were what Peter has described, but the amount of money that the federal government has spent on social programs since the 1960s it's just enormous. The spending on education in real terms, adjusted for inflation, has greatly risen over time. The one thing, when Brent was talking, I was saying here. I couldn't agree more with him. The one thing that Brent did not explicitly say, though I think it was buried in his comments, was that so much of this goes back to the breakdown of the nuclear family, which I think is where these particular morals are. You know, I grew up, I don't want to say I was necessarily poor, but I didn't have much. And I would never think of stealing. It just was something that we were taught. You simply don't do it. You just eat less quality food and you wear nasty or old clothes and so forth. But with the breakdown of and it's happening, of course, in the Black community, it's 75 to 80% of all children grow up in a single parent household. But we also see a rise in Hispanic households as well as white households. And we're seeing that with this particular breakdown, so many social pathologies show up, and people they're not taught as much right from wrong and so forth. So I wish the world was exactly the way Peter described.
Let's let Peter
But it's
respond.
not.
Let's let Peter respond to what you just said. Peter, your response.
Yeah, I mean, very, very briefly, I think the government has spent a ton on social programs. That's definitely true. That number is dwarfed by several orders of magnitude in what we spent on the military. And
That's not correct. No, that's simply demonstrably false. The federal government spends $3 or $4 trillion
I'm not talking about all these social programs in the world.
Well, that's an easy way to do it.
Things like Social Security, which is a universally beloved program, and Medicare and Medicaid. If you exclude those fundamental programs that everyone loves, yes, and we can debate that, but let's just move on, okay? For the sake of this point, the government spending on these programs, obviously, even if you assume, as Mike says, that it's been so much, it's being misspent. It's not being spent in the way it should be spent, because I can tell you that if you actually put money in communities, actually build schools. When was the last time a new school was built with public money or upgraded with public money?
They're being built all over Illinois, Peter. Where have you been? They've built
I'm not saying
hundreds
all over,
of schools, and not
you can't
just
say all over
Illinois.
I'm saying in some of these communities where Mike thinks obviously there aren't enough
new schools and libraries are built all over urban areas.
Well, that's sort of like, you can't change how people live and how they actually organize whatever families they want. There are obviously 2 father households, 2 mother households now. There are all sorts of households. And you can't say, no, it's got to be exactly this way. Like, the world has moved on. And I mean,
don't you need, but Peter, don't you need one thing? Peter, let me ask this to Peter.
I'm trying to tell you that the world is changing.
Peter,
just wait,
we
Bruce,
know
the world
that.
is changing.
I know that.
So
I know that.
rather than try to actually say like, hey, if everyone goes back exactly to this way, things will be rad. It just doesn't work.
I'm
just telling you, it's not feasible.
But if you have, but just a minute. If you have a 2-parent household, and I don't care whether they're a mother and a traditional mother and father, they're 2 mothers, they're 2 fathers, whatever it is, you need an adult figure in raising a family that gives you the sense of what's right and what's wrong. In other words, you don't steal from other people. Yeah. You don't covet what another person has. You basically go through you can call it the 10 Commandments, call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But again, you need 2 adults saying that. I'm not arguing that there's anything wrong.
I went to Catholic school.
Good for you.
I went to Catholic school. I'm very lucky to have great parents.
Great.
Who I'll see in hopefully a few days. But I knew, from them and also just in general that, stealing is bad. It's wrong.
Good.
And I mean, you don't need to have been raised, a certain way to know that.
Peter, you're making the assumption as well that there is a direct relationship between spending, for example, on education and outcomes. That if you spend more money, you will get better outcomes.
I'm not.
You did, of course. You said we need to build better buildings. There's no evidence whatsoever.
That's not at all what I said.
You said to build. Look,
I said we should be investing in communities.
You said in education, build schools. There's no evidence that more spending on schools leads to better outcomes. It's what happens in the classroom.
What people have to do. Let me make a point.
I'm not just saying build buildings.
Let me make a point here.
Invest in schools.
What has to happen is parents, again, regardless of how you define parents, they have to invest in their children and give them more time. On that note, we are out of time. Brent, Peter, Mike, thank you very much for being with us. Frankie Rodriguez, thank you very much. Merry Christmas. We've got another hour coming up. Don't go away. Judy and Rush Darwish coming up, and the Spokane duo dueling on Beyond the Beltway.
Roll over. Chance high 5. All right. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
Not wearing a mask in public is like not wearing a seatbelt because no one else is.
Or not wearing a life jacket because it's uncomfortable.
Or not wearing a helmet because it's just one play.
Or not putting me in a car seat because we're only going down the block.
A mask is like anything that keeps us safe. It only works if you wear it.
So wear a mask when you're out in public, because we're all safer and stronger when we go all in, Illinois.